Hello les mecs, les mecs. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week-by-week basis. And today's topic of discussion is mental health. And on the conversation around mental health, I want to talk about healthy ways to deal with bad feelings. And I think that this is like super straightforward, super basic, but not all of us put it into practice. And I think oftentimes it is the cultural norms that impede our ability to address some of those negative feelings in healthy and adaptive ways. And so I've seen this in the circles that I have myself circulated in, where the idea of self-care is just completely like mocked, but then people self-medicate with like alcohol. I don't quite understand why self-care is something that is a subject of mockery, especially when we think about gender norms around self-care. I think that there's a lot more acceptance and openness to self-care when we're women in competitive environments, but then self-care is still something that is like, for men, it's like we're too macho for self-care. And so this conversation is for my female audience, of course, but also like very much so for my male audience, where self-care isn't often even in the vocabulary. Like they don't know what self-care means if it doesn't mean gym or going to the gym and taking like a protein shake. And like, I wish that I was being tongue-in-cheek, but for a lot of men that I have known, that was pretty much the extent of their self-care. And it didn't have anything to do with emotional alignment. Even like that would be mocked if I even mentioned that. It didn't have anything to do with making sure that they felt like they were, I guess, addressing any of the heaviness that comes around with like some of the pressures that come with day-to-day life. And so I want to just come on here and have that conversation. I think it's important. And so the first thing that I want to talk about by way of self-care, especially for those of us whose love language is physical, I think that this is so important that we incorporate physical self-care. So that involves like routine massages, adjustments, and like just things that make your body feel good, and not just working out, right? And I think that working out is a really great way to focus on self-care. I think it's a lifestyle choice. I myself work out as a lifestyle. It's not something that I do and then turn off. Like I love working out, I love being fit, but I think also like just recognizing that sometimes your body needs a break too. So it needs adjustments, and I've learned how to adjust myself. I adjust myself all the time. Sometimes even like a massage, and though even that's not something that I do as frequently, but it's something that I definitely plan on incorporating a lot more in my 2026 year. But I think that like for men, especially for women, I think we're very much better at self-care in that like we do facials, self-care, we do manis, we do pedis. There's lots of things that we do that involve just taking care of our physical selves that really feel good emotionally, right? We feel like an emotional lift. I think that men can also like think about how they expand like the repertoire of self-care by focusing on like these physical pick-me-ups that are more than just going to the gym and drinking a protein shake. Or if we look at some of the unhealthy ways that men sort of manage their emotions, like it can involve like overconsumption and abuse of different substances. And so for any of us who really are thinking about like, how do I really support myself as I have like all of these responsibilities that I'm balancing, I think self-care is just such an easy win, right? And again, this is massages, this is going to a spa, going to a sauna, like things that really do bring about those endorphins in you over and above going to the gym. I think it's just so important that all of us incorporate that. Facials, you have no idea like how much of a mood booster a facial is. I do facials every week. I do my own manis and pedis. I got like all of the professional equipment to do it myself because I just couldn't deal with like the coordination and logistics just to get my nails done. So I figured out how to do it on my own. Best decision ever. And like even my pedis, I figured out how to do it on my own like during COVID. Best decision ever. And I do it regularly. I do it now more frequently than I did when I had to like plan it in and like deal with logistics. It's just much more convenient, but it really does build into my own sense of self-care. And I think that like it doesn't need to be the same things, but it needs to be more than fitness. And I think a lot of people think self-care is really just fitness, but fitness is one of many elements and factors that really fit into self-care. And now another element that I want to talk about regarding self-soothing, like how we take care of ourselves emotionally, is giving ourselves the permission to feel our emotions. And so some of us have a bias, like there's some emotions that we're comfortable feeling and then other emotions that we feel less comfortable feeling, whereas all of our emotions, I mean, we feel them anyway. So I think that having judgments on our emotions is just so unhelpful. And I think giving yourself permission to feel your feelings, and also holding the standard that you expect that other people give you permission to feel your feelings as well. And so this doesn't mean that you get to be abusive or abrasive, but you get to feel like your emotions are being honored and respected. And so feeling your feelings, I've talked about this in like the first video that I posted this week. I think that it's important that we recognize that our feelings are what they are. They are a signal as to how we feel, what value is being sort of triggered, or what value value is being activated regarding the situation that we're in. And the best thing that we can do for ourselves, rather than talk ourselves out of our feelings and deprioritize our feelings or betray our emotions, is to honor those emotions and then like seek reconciliation. Like figure out like what is it that I need to do to feel better about the situation so that I can feel like I'm honoring myself and respecting myself and respecting my emotions. And there's so many different ways that people talk us into doing things that we don't feel good about. And the best way to not allow yourself to be manipulated in that way is to honor and respect your feelings first and foremost, to recognize that like any conversation that involves you breaking away from feeling aligned and feeling comfortable and feeling good about the decisions that you're making is just not a conversation that you're going to entertain. You're not going to let someone talk you out of how you have positioned yourself against a specific issue. You're not going to let peer pressure deter you either. You're going to let your values, your convictions, your beliefs be the barometer for how you decide to move forward. I think that a lot of us, we do succumb to peer pressure in areas where it really does put a stain in our sense of integrity. And I think that we would be better at honoring ourselves and respecting ourselves if we respected the boundaries around our emotions, around how our emotions are being triggered in discussions where emotions are typically devalued. And I think that in discussions where emotions are devalued, I think it's much more important to push the needle on the fact that we need to be given permission to bring our whole selves to all spaces. If there's a space that devalues your emotional response to the issue at hand, then maybe that's not a situation or a scenario that you want to be in. And I think that rather than like walk away from a conversation, from a decision feeling horrible, like why did I just do that? I think just setting the tone even in advance of those scenarios is just so helpful to making sure that you feel like you're honoring and respecting yourself. You're growing and evolving sense of self in a way where every conversation you walk away from, you feel good about because you've represented yourself in that conversation by holding space, respecting your emotions, and communicating your boundaries in alignment to that. Another self-soothing mechanism I think that is just so rarely ever leveraged is just taking that time to spend time with yourself. And I think a lot of us are really afraid of the silence. We're afraid of being alone with ourselves. We pack our schedules with lots of things to do, with lots of people to interact with, that we're not alone with our own thoughts. And I think that it's just so important to develop a relationship with yourself, whereas when you're alone with your own thoughts, it's not a daunting and scary feeling. And it's gonna feel daunting and scary at first because maybe there are specific things that you don't want to think about. But like even just this week, I've been having this week off from work, and it's a lot of opportunities for me to just kind of sit silently and like address my thoughts that I've been suppressing because they're scary, right? And there's situations that like I needed to take responsibility for, things that maybe I was procrastinating about because like I was anxious about something. There was like something I was worrying about that I was able to, I guess, push that worry aside because I was busy doing other things that like were a little bit more time sensitive. But like when you're alone with your thoughts, it's like those things come up and they will always come up until you address them. And so this week I was able to address them and I feel just so much better. And I wish that I gave myself an opportunity to have the silence really allow all of those thoughts to come up so that I could have an opportunity to address those thoughts. And I think that it's just so interesting the way that we engage with worry and anxiety. And I'm someone who, like, when I make a big move, there's like so much anxiety around it. And I guess it speaks to my risk profile. Like, I'm risk tolerant, but there's just certain risks that feels like such a huge leap. But I'm always able to make that leap if I give myself the opportunity to just sit with my thoughts and like work through those anxieties, work through those worries, and like bring myself over the edge. But if I procrastinate on having that conversation with myself, that inner dialogue, then those decisions are not going to be made. Because as a prerequisite for me making those decisions, I have to first have that inner dialogue. And I think that that must be the same for so many different people. Like, there's so many decisions that are waiting to be made because you haven't had that conversation with yourself. You haven't really like level set with yourself as yet. And so if you've held off on those conversations for a little bit too long, those conversations don't happen before 2026 arrives. I think that it's important to have those conversations as early as possible. And I'm speaking from personal experience, holding space for silence. I'm good at sitting and reflecting on things that I enjoy reflecting on. Don't get me wrong, like I'm really good at spending quality time on my own, but where I really just like embrace the silence and let those worries come up and then like work through each worry, I think that's something that I do less frequently because it's uncomfortable, but I always feel better when I do it because it always enables me to make the right decisions for me moving forward after I do it. And so these are some self-soothing techniques makes that I think no one really talks about so much. And I think that they're just so simple and easy things that we can incorporate into our day-to-day lives. I think especially self-care across the gender spectrum. I think self-care looks so different for different genders, or how you identify by way of gender. But I think that there are so many things that like should be the same, because it doesn't matter what gender you are. These are things that are just easy mood boosters that you want to incorporate. And when we think about honoring our emotions, I think we need to be less tolerant of spaces that don't allow us to integrate and bring our full selves into those discussions. We also need to set the boundaries so that we're never walking away from a discussion feeling like we didn't honor, respect, hold space, and validate our own emotions, beliefs, values, and convictions around certain things. That's so important. And last but not least is giving yourself the opportunity to work through those quiet anxieties, those little worries that you try to avoid at all costs. I think it's important to get comfortable having those inner dialogues with yourself, spending time with yourself long enough so that they come up and then you can address them, because you always feel better afterwards. In any case, that was the conversation that I wanted to have today. Some food for thought for you. If I have piqued your interest, we do have live events where it's more interactive, you and I discussing together or in a group. We have those events twice a month, every month for the foreseeable future on our website, so definitely be sure to check that out. Now, these events are paid events, so we have different package plans depending on how you see yourself engaging with our community long term, so you can take a look at those as well. It gives you a little bit of money shaved off the top. We also do host leadership workshops for children, so these are parent-child leadership workshops, or digital, virtual, and continuous learning environments, one of the first of its kind that enables parents and children alike to cultivate the language and the competencies of leadership quotient. And so we believe that leadership quotient is built on 4 fundamentals, and so cultivating a strong sense of self-concept, autonomy, self-efficacy, and compassion. And we think that with those things developed, we all have the opportunity to become leaders in our own right. So definitely check that out. If you have a self-soothing mechanism that you feel would be beneficial to the community, then leave it in the comment down below. Share this video. Definitely follow us. Every follow helps so much. And I look forward to chatting with all of you very soon. We'll talk to you later.